Let's get started with our first big story of the day, and it's a wild one. Joe Rogan, the voice of the UFC and one of the most influential figures in MMA, has stirred up controversy again. This time he's openly saying he wants to see UFC heavyweights taking performance-enhancing drugs again. That's right, Joe says he's absolutely tired of watching fat heavyweights lumber around the octagon. He misses the days when guys looked like superheroes, when fighters were lean, shredded, and terrifying. According to Joe, everything changed when the UFC brought in USADA, the United States Anti-Doping Agency. He says that's when the physiques of many top-tier fighters, especially heavyweights, completely melted away. One of the best examples he gave was none other than Alistair Overeem, a fighter who was once considered one of the scariest men alive. Joe points to Overeem's legendary entrance when he was about to fight Brock Lesnar. At that moment, Alistair was on a whole different level. Rogan didn't hold back. He said, "Alistair was saucy as hell." Rogan reminisced about Overeem flexing on stage during the weigh-ins. Back then, fans called him Uberem because he looked like a bodybuilder who could also strike like a world-class kickboxer. He was 260 pounds of solid muscle, ripped to the bone, and arguably one of the most elite strikers in the world at the time. Rogan said when Overeem walked out, he looked like a video game character brought to life, and even Brock Lesnar, who is no small man himself, seemed shaken by the sight. But then came the drug tests, and everything changed. Alistair had to tone things down. Suddenly he became more human. He was still skilled, no doubt, but that terrifying enhanced version of him was gone. He wasn't Uber M anymore, Joe said. He was just a regular guy with really good fighting skills. But the Destroyer, that version vanished. Joe didn't stop there. He said, "I would have loved to see what kind of run Alistair Overeem could have had if he stayed on the sauce. My God, it would have been epic. Just imagine what kind of chaos he could have caused in the heavyweight division. It would have been absolutely wild." In classic Rogan style, he wrapped up by saying what many might consider controversial, but undeniably entertaining. "I want fun. I don't want to see fat heavyweights just standing around. Get the hell out of here. I want Alistair back. Get them back on the sauce." Whether you agree or not, one thing is certain, Joe Rogan never holds back, and he's bringing the heat with this take. Moving on to our second news story, Tom Aspinall has sparked an interesting conversation by claiming that MMA is actually safer than boxing. That might sound surprising to some, especially given the brutal image MMA has in the media, with its elbows, knees, and ground and pound action. But according to Aspinall, it's the long-term damage in boxing that makes it far more dangerous. Tom explained, "I don't actually watch boxing because I think it's quite violent, right?" He's not talking about surface level violence either. It's the kind of damage that happens after a fighter is already unconscious or clearly hurt that bothers him the most. "The bit that gets me," Tom said, "is when you can see they're already knocked out and you're still hitting them. And I understand, it's your job, but I think, no, I can't watch that." He then breaks it down further, saying, "I would debate that MMA is well safer than boxing, really." Tom makes a strong case. In boxing, fighters wear big padded gloves, which people often assume makes it safer. But what happens is, those gloves allow fighters to take and throw many more punches without getting stopped. You got a glove and it's a big padded one in boxing, right? But when you hit someone, you concuss them. Then they give them a 10-second count and you let them go again. Hit them again. He emphasizes the length and repeated trauma in boxing matches. A boxing fight is 36 minutes long. That kind of knockdown and concussion can happen 10 times in those 36 minutes. In MMA, it's different. You hit them once, they fall to the floor, and you might get a follow-up strike or two before the referee jumps in to stop it. That's it. The damage doesn't keep piling up in the same way. Tom then brings up the accumulated damage that most boxers deal with throughout their careers. What you gotta remember about boxing is, they've all had like 50+ amateur fights. Some of them have had hundreds. And this kind of trauma happens again and again over the years, even before they turn professional. Then they have a long pro career and it just keeps happening. He admits that MMA may look more brutal at times, especially with elbows, kicks, and submissions, but it's less repetitive head trauma over time. The person interviewing Tom also agrees, saying, "Yeah, now that you said that, I actually do agree too. I think with the big guys, you'll hit them once, rattle the brain, and the ref will stop it. But in boxing, especially with smaller guys, they might not have that one-punch knockout power, so they just keep landing concussive punches over and over for 36 straight minutes." Tom wraps it up by saying, "I'm not saying MMA is not dangerous, because it is, but I think boxing is more dangerous in the long run. People see the big gloves and and only punches, and they think it's less harmful, but I don't see it that way. I think boxing takes a heavier toll on the brain. Now let's move on to another big story. Alexander Volkov is openly frustrated with the current state of the UFC heavyweight division, and he's not holding back when it comes to Jon Jones. According to Volkov, he believes that if it weren't for the constant delays surrounding Jon Jones and his title defenses, he would have already earned a shot at UFC gold. Volkov expressed his disappointment very clearly, saying, "Of course I have a negative opinion about the delay of the Jones-Aspinall fight because my chances to fight for the championship title are getting smaller, and time is running out." At 35 years old, Volkov knows that he doesn't have forever in this sport, especially in a division filled with younger, rising talent like Tom Aspinall and Sergey Pavlovich. He further explained how other divisions are more active, saying, "In other weight classes, there's a real conveyor belt of fights. That's why I'm unhappy." Volkov believes that the heavyweight title picture has come to a standstill ever since Jon Jones captured the belt but hasn't returned to defend it. "I would have had a chance to test myself in a title fight a long time ago if it weren't for Jon Jones." Despite his frustration, Volkov tried to be fair and added, "But I can understand him. The UFC gives him this privilege. He feels like he is the master of the situation. Jon knows that he will be valuable to the UFC in any case, and he just takes advantage of it." This is a critical statement, highlighting that Volkov doesn't place all the blame on Jon Jones himself, but rather on how the UFC enables him. Here's the most important point Volkov makes. The question here is not so much about Jon Jones, but about the fact that the UFC allows him to behave this way and shows excessive loyalty to him. As a result, everyone is waiting, and that's exactly the problem. The entire heavyweight division is on pause, waiting for Jon Jones to recover from injury and decide whether he wants to fight Tom Aspinall, unify the title, or even retire. Meanwhile, fighters like Volkov, who have been on impressive win streaks, are stuck in limbo, unable to climb the final step toward a title shot. Volkov has every right to be frustrated. He's looked sharp in his recent performances, finishing his last opponents in dominant fashion and proving he's still a top contender. But as long as Jon Jones holds the title hostage and the UFC continues to give him special treatment, fighters like Volkov are forced to just sit back and wait. This situation raises bigger questions about UFC's matchmaking priorities, favoritism, and how much power certain champions hold over an entire division's progress. And for someone like Volkov, who's earned his spot, the delays are nothing short of career-altering. Let's move on to another big headline. Daniel Cormier has expressed real interest in coaching the Russian version of TUF, The Ultimate Fighter, opposite none other than his longtime rival, Jon Jones. The show, officially known as ALF Global, is essentially Russia's take on TUF, and it's been making waves recently due to all the drama and intensity surrounding it. Initially, Nate Diaz was brought in to be one of the main coaches for the series. However, things took a wild turn when reports came out that Diaz and his team got into a brawl with Russian fighters on set. Not long after that incident, Diaz made his exit from the show, leaving a coaching slot wide open. It didn't take long before Daniel Cormier revealed that he was originally offered the gig, but had initially turned it down. Now though, things are different. With Jon Jones already in Thailand coaching on the show and reporting all kinds of chaotic stories, DC is starting to reconsider. He admitted on his YouTube channel that he's now more interested than ever in jumping into the action. The reason I said that I'm more interested in this show today after what Jones said, man, sign me up for Russian tough. Jones himself recently talked about his experience on the show and how intense the environment is. He said, "I've been around the Bushido spirit for a long time. Martial arts spirit, where everybody has a certain degree of rules that you don't cross. I don't think there's a lot of that here. Some guys are warriors, and some guys are just street fighters. There are insults, there are weapons. I mean, this show, there's nothing like it. And for DC, that's the selling point." He responded to John's description by saying, "How in the world, if you're a coach or a personality, how could you not want to be involved in something like this?" Where Jon Jones is telling you, "This kind of scares me a little bit." That's a pretty bold statement considering their long-standing rivalry, where both men shared the octagon in some of the most heated title fights in UFC history. Seeing them coach against each other in a completely unfiltered and unpredictable environment like Russian TUF would be nothing short of entertainment gold. Cormier even admitted some regret about turning it down, saying, "Honestly, that's exactly what it is. Like, man, this is crazy out here. I should have done the show, man. I really should have done this show, because in this world, I would have thrived. I would have loved it. With the coaching spot still open and DC clearly fired up, fans can't help but speculate. Will we see Jones versus Cormier 3, but as rival coaches first? One thing's for sure, if Daniel Cormier ends up flying to Thailand to join the madness, Russian TUF just became must-see TV. Next, let's talk about a surprisingly funny moment. Jon Jones reacting to being kicked by Hasbulla. As you probably know by now, Jon Jones is currently in Thailand, where he's serving as a coach on the Russian version of The Ultimate Fighter, known as ALF Global. And it turns out he's not the only celebrity on set. Social media sensation Hasbulla Magomedov is also involved, and apparently he's been taking some shots at the UFC legend himself. During a recent interview, Jones opened up about the lighthearted chaos Hasbulla brings to the set. "Me and Hasbulla have been having a great time," said Jones with a smile. "We fight almost every single day. Right now, I've got a bloody lip. He may have kicked me in the mouth, but we have good times. He's very strong and he knows how to fight. Yeah, we have fun." Yes, you heard that right. One of the most feared men in MMA history, the same guy who's dominated the light heavyweight and heavyweight divisions, is getting kicked in the mouth by Hasbulla, but the vibe seems more playful than serious. Still, the idea of Hasbulla fighting Jones every day, biting his ear and kicking him in the face, has fans laughing all over social media. Hasbulla, of course, is known for his mischievous nature, and this isn't the first time he's squared up with UFC fighters for laughs. But going after Jon Jones and actually leaving him with a bloody lip, that's next level Hasbulla mischief. Now, if only we could see someone like Tom Aspinall try to kick Jon Jones in the cage for real. That's the matchup fans have been dying to see, but for now, it remains uncertain if and when it'll happen. In the meantime, Jones seems more than happy sparring with Hasbulla, joking around, and soaking up the wild environment on the ALF Global set. But the fun doesn't stop there. Jones also stays active on social media, continuing to trade jabs with fans online. In one recent interaction, a fan tweeted, "You're the most insecure high-level athlete in history." Instead of ignoring it, Jones fired back with classic sarcasm. "Sweet, give me a record for that as well. I'll take it." A quick, clever response that shows Jones is not afraid to mix it up outside the cage either. While some fans praised the comeback, others still criticized him for being overly sensitive online. But love him or hate him, Jon Jones always finds a way to keep himself in the spotlight, whether it's with actual fights, funny interviews, or Twitter comebacks. So, what do you think? Who won that little back and forth, the fan or Jon Jones? And more importantly, should Hasbulla get a UFC contract after leaving Jon with a bloody lip? One thing's for sure, the set of ALF Global might be more entertaining than some actual fight cards. Let's wrap up with our final story, and it's a big one. Islam Makhachev's teammate speaks on his potential retirement following the highly anticipated bout with Jack Della Maddalena. While speculation has been swirling about the reigning lightweight champion's future, especially if he becomes a two-division title holder, longtime friend and training partner Josh Thompson has some thoughts of his own, and he's not convinced Islam is ready to call it quits just yet. As fans continue to wonder whether Makhachev will ride off into the sunset if he captures the welterweight title, Thompson believes the Dagestani warrior isn't done with the sport. "I don't think he walks away right after winning the second belt," Thompson said. According to him, Islam is more likely to stick around for at least one title defense, but only under the right circumstances. So who would be a worthy opponent for Makhachev at welterweight? Kamaru Usman is one name that immediately comes to mind. The former champion has already floated the idea of facing Islam, and stylistically it would be a massive clash. Both fighters are elite wrestlers, have championship experience, and bring serious legacy implications to the table. For Islam, it would be a chance to prove himself against the previous king of the division. For Usman, it would be an opportunity to cement his legacy by taking on one of the pound-for-pound best. Another intriguing matchup, Shavkat Rakhmonov. The undefeated Kazakh star is quickly becoming a household name, and his relentless pressure, finishing ability, and calm demeanor make him a serious threat. A bout between Islam and Shavkat wouldn't just be a dream matchup for hardcore fans. It would be an event of epic proportions, especially in the Caucasus and Central Asian regions. The stylistic matchup, cultural significance, and potential for a historic clash between two of the most technically sound and composed fighters in the sport today would make headlines worldwide. Thompson said, "I think he'll defend it one time, and I think it depends." He elaborated further, explaining that if the right name emerges, whether it's Shavkat Rakhmonov or Sean Brady, if he gets past Ian Gary, then it's worth considering. However, if someone like Ian Gary becomes the next in line, Islam might not be interested. I don't think Islam wants to fight someone who runs around the cage. He wants guys that come forward and bring the fight, Thompson added. He went on to say, Kamaru Usman said he'd fight Islam. That surprised me, but that could be a money fight. That might be one to make. The idea of Islam facing Usman would be massive, not only from a financial standpoint, but also in terms of legacy and fan interest. At 34 years old, Islam knows that time is ticking. According to Josh, Islam wants to retire on his own terms, not after a bad loss. He doesn't want to take a bad loss and then say, I'm done. He wants to leave when he's still on top. So while retirement might be on the horizon, don't expect Islam Makhachev to vanish the moment he touches gold at welterweight. If the right opponent stands across from him, we just might see him defend that belt at least one more time.